You are 26 years old, and you work in data recovery for a mid-sized cybersecurity firm in Frankfurt. Your job is to find what people lose and return it to them. You are not particularly ambitious. You are good at your work, you are paid reasonably, and you go home at a predictable hour. That is the shape of your life until the night a senior partner at the firm asks you to recover deleted files from a government-adjacent server that you are not supposed to be able to access, and you do it in 4 hours. And what you find inside is not lost files. It is a folder of communications between 3 European finance ministers coordinating the movement of public pension funds into private accounts registered to shell companies in Luxembourg. You copy it before you report back. You don't know why. Instinct, maybe? Or something colder than instinct. You report that the recovery was unsuccessful. You go home. You put the folder on an encrypted drive and you hide it. And then you sit in your apartment for a long time thinking about what you have and what it is worth. That is the beginning. Not a dramatic one. No one points a gun at you. No threshold moment announces itself. You simply stumble into the engine room of how the world actually works, and instead of stepping back out, you look at the machinery for a long time, and then you decide to learn how to operate it. The first attempt is cautious to the point of being almost useless. You send a single anonymous communication to one of the finance ministers. You are not explicit. You do not name a price. You simply indicate that you are aware of what he did and that your continued silence has conditions. He does not respond. 2 weeks pass. Then a man you have never met sits across from you at a coffee shop and slides a USB drive across the table and tells you that if you ever contact the minister again, the drive will be delivered to everyone you love. You pick up the drive. You nod. You leave. You spend 3 days in controlled fear, and then you spend a week analyzing the drive and determining that it contains nothing of substance. It is a bluff, an intimidation tool, the response of someone who doesn't want to pay but also doesn't want escalation. You file that away. The minister does not want noise. He wants quiet. That means the information you hold is more valuable than the threat he sent back. You simply haven't learned how to hold it correctly yet. You spend the next 18 months learning. You read everything available on leverage, negotiation, and the structure of deniability. You study how previous blackmail operations failed. Almost all of them fail because the operator is greedy, impatient, or visible. You study corporate espionage cases, political scandals that were suppressed, whistleblower prosecutions. You learn that the people who get caught are the ones who make demands too large to be managed quietly. The art is not in the demand. The art is in the positioning. You want to be the quiet option. The sustainable option. Not the crisis. The alternative to the crisis. You rebuild your approach. You do not go back to the minister. That channel is burned. Instead you begin collecting from other directions, methodically, with patience you did not know you had before this. Your cybersecurity work gives you access. Not to everything, but to enough. You develop a secondary practice. Legitimate consulting, small clients, unremarkable work, that puts you inside the networks of executives, politicians, and private wealth managers. You are not looking for specific things. You are creating conditions where things find you. Misconfigured servers. Careless communications. Documents that should have been deleted and weren't. You are not a hacker in the cinematic sense. You are a technician with extraordinary patience and a very clear understanding of what information is worth. By the time you are 31, you have actionable material on 11 individuals. A regional bank director. 2 members of a national parliament. A shipping company executive whose vessels carry things that don't appear on manifests. A judge whose rulings in commercial disputes follow a pattern that does not correlate to the law. A pharmaceutical procurement officer. And others. You have not approached any of them yet. You are waiting until the network is wide enough that any single thread pulled does not unravel the whole thing. You understand that the first contact is the most dangerous moment in any leverage relationship. You are going to be ready before you make it. The first active engagement is with the shipping executive. His exposure is the cleanest. Documentation of cargo manifests altered to conceal arms components moving through 3 jurisdictions. Your approach is nothing like the fumbling first attempt with the finance minister. You don't contact him directly. You contact his attorney through a channel that cannot be traced. You indicate the existence of the documentation without specifying its format or source, and you name a specific and moderate figure, not so large that it constitutes an existential threat, not so small that it signals weakness. 14,000 euros monthly, transferred through a structure you have already built and tested. You give him 72 hours. He pays on the 68th hour. He continues paying for 4 years before his company is acquired, and the acquiring corporation's compliance review makes the manifest a liability he can no longer afford, at which point you accept a final lump settlement of 300,000 and close the relationship cleanly. That is the template. Moderate, sustainable, structured, clean. You do not want power in the way people imagine it when they imagine this kind of power. You do not want to destroy anyone. Destruction is loud and it attracts attention, and it ends the revenue stream. What you want is the relationship, the ongoing, quiet, mutually understood arrangement in which the subject pays a manageable amount, and you say nothing and everyone continues their life. You think of it as a tax. An unofficial, private tax on people who have already been collecting unofficial, private taxes from everyone else. By your 36th year you are managing 34 active relationships across 7 countries. The network has a structure now, tiered, compartmentalized, with cutouts between yourself and the most exposed collection points. You have 2 people who work for you, either of whom knows the other exists, and neither of whom knows your real name. One handles certain communications. The other manages a portion of the financial architecture. You are the only person who holds the complete picture. This is by design, and it is the reason you are still operating when others who tried to build similar structures are not. The moral weight of it is not what you expected. You expected guilt. You expected the specific psychological burden of knowing you are doing something that society would call predatory. What you find instead is something more like the flat, functional feeling you had when you were recovering data. You are doing technical work on a system, and the system happens to be composed of human beings and their secrets. You are not indifferent to the subjects. You know their files the way a doctor knows a patient chart, completely, clinically, without the warmth that would make the knowledge personal. The shipping executive has a daughter with a degenerative condition. The judge's wife left him in the 3rd year of your arrangement, and he started drinking. You know these things. You do not use them unless you have to. You never have to. The money comes on schedule, and you let people keep their dignity because dignity is what keeps them paying. The first crisis happens in your 4th year of active operation. One of your subjects, a mid-level political advisor whose exposure involves the falsification of polling data for 3 consecutive electoral cycles, apparently discusses his situation with someone. You don't know this until a separate party contacts you. Not to threaten. To negotiate. Someone else has discovered that the advisor is being managed, and they want to know if you are interested in selling the relationship. You take 11 days to respond. In those 11 days you determine who the party is, trace their operational structure far enough to understand their capabilities, and assess whether they represent a threat or an opportunity. They are a small private intelligence firm, ex-government personnel, operating in the market for corporate intelligence. They are not law enforcement. They are not connected to any of your subjects. They are entrepreneurs of a very specific kind, and they have encountered your work the way a geologist encounters evidence of an underground structure, not the thing itself, but the shape it leaves in the surrounding terrain. You do not sell them the relationship. You sell them something else. Information about a third party, someone not in your network, someone whose exposure you had cataloged and set aside because the risk-reward calculation didn't support activation. You give them enough to be useful. In return they give you something more valuable than money, a piece of intelligence about a figure you have been trying to reach for 2 years, a senior minister in a government whose infrastructure contracts move through channels that your analysis has identified as almost certainly corrupt but whose personal communications you have not been able to access. The private intelligence firm's information gives you the access point you needed. 6 months later that minister becomes your most significant active relationship. The ongoing risk is not what most people would guess. It is not law enforcement, though you are always aware of it. The practical risk of law enforcement is manageable because your architecture has no single point of failure, and because your subjects have powerful incentives to avoid the exposure that an investigation would create. The actual risk, the one you spend the most time on, is lateral. It is other operators. People who have discovered that leverage is a business and are building their own structures and will eventually overlap with yours. The private intelligence firm was the first. They are not the last. You develop protocols for these encounters. Sometimes you share. Sometimes you acquire. Once you neutralize, through the careful application of one subject's information against another party's operator, a situation that was approaching something that could not be managed quietly. That one cost you a relationship you had cultivated for 3 years and €12,000 in architecture you have to rebuild from scratch. You absorb it. You rebuild. The operation continues. You are 41 years old now. The network has 37 active relationships, 2 in dormancy pending better timing, and a catalog of 17 additional subjects you have not approached and may never approach, held as options, as insurance, as the kind of reserve that keeps the whole structure from feeling precarious. The money is substantial and almost entirely invisible. You live moderately. You have never bought anything that would attract attention. You drive an ordinary car. You live in an ordinary apartment in a city that is not Frankfurt and that you are not originally from. You have people who think they know you and they know a version of you that is accurate enough to hold up under casual examination. You do not have anyone who knows you completely. That is the cost that you did not fully calculate when you began, and the one you find yourself returning to most often, not with grief exactly, but with a particular awareness that something was exchanged that cannot be reclaimed. The work does not feel like power in the way you imagined power would feel. It feels like maintenance. Like operating a system that requires constant monitoring and occasional intervention and the steady application of judgment in situations that have no clean answer. A subject whose exposure has become more dangerous to hold than to release. A relationship where the subject is beginning to show signs of desperation that could produce an unpredictable response. A new piece of information that changes the calculus of an existing arrangement in ways that need to be carefully managed before the subject realizes what has changed. These are the problems that occupy you. Not the abstract question of what you are doing or whether it is right. Those questions were answered a long time ago, in whatever direction you answered them, but the operational, specific, ongoing problem of maintaining a structure built entirely from the weight of what people cannot afford to have known. You hold it. Every day you hold it. And the structure holds. So far it holds.